want to breathe life into that growing pain or that celebration or that passion that you have. And I want to ignite it through stories. In order to do that, I'm going to have some conversations, some real good conversations to connect a story to somebody else's reality to inspire them. I'm going to have an impact on so many different lives. I'm a big fan in learning by listening to others. So let's get ready for an adventure full of different emotions that's going to be expressed from me to you to my guest. Are you ready to be inspired? Because I know that I am. This is something that I'm not giving up on. I'm going to do this. God, my lips are dry. I can see people and say, you have to have a lot of talent to be taught. So I want to welcome my guest, Susan Lee. I'm so excited to have this conversation. Unfortunately, some of the things that we're going to talk about, it can make someone think about things in an uncomfortable manner, but I want those conversations to happen. So before we get started, I want to introduce Susan. She was born in Hong Kong. She's a proud product of the New York City schools. She received her undergrad at Barnard College and her master's at NYU. And specifically, I love the fact that she loves to help people in her community. Anytime she sees someone struggling, she wants to figure out ways to kind of make sure that people are living their best life. And then right now, an amazing thing that she's doing, she is running for City Council District 1. So without further ado, I'm really excited to have you on board and for us to have an open discussion around what's most recently been going on in the United States, Asian hate crime. So I think I wanted just to begin to start with some things that you've been facing.
Right. Thank you, Letitia, for having me. So yeah, I mean, the rise in Asian hate crime is nothing new. I think that Asian hate crime has been happening for decades, if centuries. And I think that right now it's brought to the forefront because we're speaking up about it. And one of the things that happened to me back in February was I was a victim of an assault on the subway. The ironic thing was I was in the subway to investigate the homeless and the crime situation so that I could be a well-informed candidate and kind of, write about the policies and how I would tackle those issues. And ironically, I was a victim just trying to help, right? I was there to try to help and I became a victim. I was going up the stairs and a homeless woman had shoved me while I was going up the stairs and I fell 2 steps. I knew for some reason, you know how your gut instinct tells you like something's not right?
Yeah.
And that was what happened when I proceeded up the stairs. And, honestly, I don't think it was a hate crime. I think the woman had mental issues, but you never know. It was in February. It could have been a hate crime, but my community has been scapegoated because of the coronavirus. Everyone's blaming us, the Chinese community, the Asian community, for bringing the virus here. So I want to be mindful. I want to be respectful of the fact that I don't want to scapegoat this woman and say she pushed me because I was Chinese. I want to give her the benefit of a doubt that it was a mentally ill individual that shoved me. Thankfully, I only fell 2 steps. I twisted my ankle. It was nothing serious where I needed to be hospitalized, thankfully. But I think that, my hesitation, it took me a while to talk about it. And my hesitation was, I know how it feels for people to pigeonhole you and to scapegoat you. And I didn't want to do that to another individual because of the fact that I want to be respectful of where she is and where she's coming from.
I mean, but it is hard to believe that with everything going on in the country that not to connect it to the hate crime, especially if this is something that has never happened to you. And it was around that time when it was just really, really bad. And it's still bad right now. because I
Right.
have friends right now that are afraid to go outside. They're afraid, they
Mhm.
literally want to carry weapons with them because they're not too certain if they're going to be attacked. And you know what
Right.
bothers me so much is because the fact that someone is going to see a visual aspect of who you are and they're ready to make a determination based off of a lot of hate that has been fueled into Americans. A lot of times people need to be educated about who we are
For sure.
addressing. I think that's the biggest thing as well too. I'm going to ask you this question because I think that
Mhm.
this is something that a lot of people need to say and to understand out loud. So most people assume when they see an Asian American, they don't understand that Asia, there's a continent that has,
Mhm.
you got Japan, you got Korea, you have, I think that's another thing that people need to understand, that you can't just assume you're all one. Am I right by saying that? I think that needs to
That
be
is.
said. Yeah, because I think a lot of people don't understand that there's a Japanese language, there's a Korean language, there's a Chinese language. People need to
Right.
understand that too and respect that they are different. I think it's just dumb. That's how they look at it.
Right. And I think, going to that point, like funding from the city for Asian American organizations are minuscule, and they lump it in as Asian American. But then if I'm a service provider and I service the Chinese and the Korean community, I can't just have one counselor because they're two different languages.
Yeah,
So you're funding me for one counselor, but I have two constituencies that I'm serving. We're not getting the resources that we need. And I think, that's a lot of the misconception is like, oh, they're Asians, but like, something as simple as our cuisine.
yeah,
Like, Koreans, they have high tolerance for spice, and, parts of China too. And I'm from Southern China, I'm from Hong Kong, and I don't really eat spicy food. So something as simple as food
yeah,
is it's just such a big difference. So I think that, a lot of times, like you said, you're correct. Like you can't just lump us into, oh, they're Asian,
yes.
because the needs, the cultural sensitivity, the religions are different.
Mhm.
And so the city is not funding us properly because they're just thinking Asian, when it's like we have all these other countries in Asia, like you said, that need services.
And I'm so glad that we're able to say something like this because I guarantee you there are so many people, Americans, that don't even understand that there's a difference. So I
That's
really
right.
wanted to say that. And with that said, because we were just also talking about the hate crime, I do understand that there's a bill that they're trying to pass right now, the COVID-19 Hate Crime Act. I think it got passed. That is almost there, but we have some Republicans that are not ready to. I know
We have six
six
of them.
that are not ready. And I can't understand. It's just so fundamental to me that people just want to feel like they could be safe. How could there be even the six people that want to I'm so lost by it. I don't understand because they don't have to get up in the morning and think about, am I going to be safe? Can I walk out in the street?
Exactly.
So I don't understand what is taking so long. So I
I
think
mean, I think that conversation is something that you and I can have because, the Black community has always had to watch their back
mhm,
when they're, going out. Like I have friends. I mean, I have this great, she was one of my bridesmaids. Um, she went to Hotchkiss, went to Harvard, went to Columbia, you know, Black woman from Atlanta, Georgia, lives in Park Slope. And she's like, I get harassed. And she's like, what is up with this? And, and I said to her during the BLM movement, like, I am so sorry because I know that you go through that, but I never look at you as a Black woman because you're my friend, right?
yeah.
So I never realized the struggle you're going
Yeah.
through until BLM. And I was like, oh my gosh, like really? And now I'm going through this. I'm campaigning out there. I'm watching my back. I don't carry weapons because I'm just kind of like, if I drop it, the person might end up using it against me.
I'm on the same page.
But I'm mindful.
Yeah.
I leave my office at 4 o'clock. If I don't, I wait for my husband to come pick me up. I mean, that's just the climate that I'm living in. And it's just unfortunate, you know, I'm canvassing and I'm handing out flyers, meeting potential voters. I always have one other person with me, if not two. One of them usually is a man, because if something goes down, I want to make sure, you know, I'm protected. So it's kind of, you know, those things that I don't think other candidates, you know, really have to deal with, non-Asian candidates or non-minority candidates have to deal with. And so that I do believe, you know, um, it is a challenging time. And I said to a friend today, I'm lost for words, because I don't even know what to say to people who vote against the bill. Like, are you
No.
kidding me?
And
Are we not watching the same news? Apparently we're not. You know, I
and,
don't know
and
what channel they're watching.
inside the bill, they literally just want to also educate people about, and I don't understand how could they deny something that way, right? Definitely you want to make sure you prosecute anyone that mistreats you, but they also want to educate the community. So for me,
Right.
it's so fundamental that something like that should be passed.
Right. And, you know, and going back to what you say about education, Illinois just passed an ethnic study initiative where they're going to teach Asian history, Asian American history in their schools. And New York, California, two of the states with the largest Asian population, hasn't done that. And, you know, and I always look at me living in New York City, like the greatest city in the world. And I feel like, why aren't we educating our kids about diversity? I honestly do not believe kids are born racist or
I agree.
bullies.
I agree.
And so, right. And they learn it from their environment. And if we can teach them about tolerance, diversity, other people's culture, then they're
Yeah.
just going to be a better world citizen.
I think I want to say this out loud, and I'm quite sure, I'm hoping that I don't offend anyone. But anytime someone thinks of the word diversity, they focus so much on black and white. And diversity means so much more than that. It's not only just diversity of the color of your skin, it's diversity of thought. It's diversity of
Right.
how your lenses, how you see things, to be open-minded to other people. And for I understand a lot of the issues within the African American community, but that doesn't take away from, if you're not European, that you get treated differently across the spectrum, right?
Right.
And
Right.
it's to me where, when we talk about diversity, I really want them to really talk about all walks of life. They say it, but they focus a lot on black and white.
Right. The interesting thing is, my district runs the gamut of all kinds of diversity, right? Ethnic, racial, socioeconomic, education. And oftentimes when I talk about how diverse my community is, it gets lost a little bit because, like you said, people just think of race. And it's like, no, there are other things like, just in my district alone, it's so unique in the fabric of how everyone's cultural experiences are woven in. I have Chinatown, I have Little Italy, I have the financial district, I have Battery Park City, I have the Lower East Side, which is predominantly Hispanic. I mean, it's just such a melting pot. And, you know, it is the oldest district in the country. The US Capitol used to be in Lower Manhattan.
Yeah, I didn't
And
know that.
so, yeah. And so, you know, it's just kind of like we have a history of, Europeans coming to this country who kind of melted into the melting pot. And then now, so I think what's really interesting is even within the non-minority, like the white population, there's also diversity within their culture, different,
Absolutely.
countries. And so I think that that's the conversation that we need to have is, why are we only learning about European history? And, now we're starting to learn about African American history, right? But where's the Asian American history? That's lost, And, one of my friend, her family came as a paper son, and it was funny because we were talking about it. I was like, oh, was your grandpa a paper son? And she's like, how do you know that? No one knows that. And I was like, well, I took up Asian history in college. So I had to wait to college
College.
to learn about my history. And so
You
it's
know,
kind of interesting.
no, it definitely is interesting. And I will say that, February is Black History Month. And to my understanding, I think Asian month is May.
That's correct.
Okay. But I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I don't think that we were taught that growing up. Like, as far as the Asian history, I don't even remember my history books even going into depth about it. We talked about wars, but nothing more than that. We never really, and the thing is, it's so unfortunate though, because you mentioned that you don't think that kids are, born with racist thoughts. But then again, we also don't teach them at a young age. Hopefully within the family members, they are, within your family you are, but the education system, they just omit that. They don't talk about it enough. So I think it goes hand in hand. You talk about it at home, and then you also, when you go to school to learn about history, that should be a part of it. All walks of life should be a part of American history, because American history makes
Right.
up so many different ethnic backgrounds. Um,
Right. It is like we, Chinese American, well, Chinese people came to this country to build the railroads,
yes, the
right? We built
Transcontinental
the
Railroad. Hmm.
right. And when we got here, they excluded spouses from coming. Wives were not allowed to come.
So sad. Isn't that so
And if
sad?
you think about it, it's their way of trying to control the population, right? Like that's my interpretation of it.
Hmm.
Is if you don't, and they're Chinese people are guest workers. They come, they built the railroad, and they leave. And that was the thing. Like they don't want people to come with their family to settle in. So we were never part of the society. They were just like come and built the railroads, and then we'll just ship you out. So that was the tragic thing, was a lot of families were separated, and the husbands would go back, visit their family, and they would have kids in China, and then they would come back single, do their thing, built the railroads, and some of them die not knowing who their child is because they had the baby and the baby was an infant. They never got to know their kids because they were here working and sending money back, remittance back to China to support their family. So this was like going on, and then I mean during World War II, Japanese Americans were
Hmm.
placed in internment camps.
Yes.
And
That
so
of I want to know about those crimes that wasn't spoken about. And I'm quite sure if I mention one or two to you, you probably are going to be familiar with it. And I really want to say this out loud, that I'm embarrassed that I didn't even know about things such as
mm,
1982 Vincent Chin. When I read this story, I don't know, it bothers me so much. This man was beaten with a bat multiple times by two European men, and they only received a $3,000 fine. That just crushes me. They got 3 years of probation and a
mhm,
$3,000 fine for a human being's life.
right. Right. And that's really, and that was his, death, Vincent's death actually galvanized the community, and we spoke up and we were like, what is going on? Is our, Asian lives only worth $3,000? Like, what is going on that like we can't prosecute properly? I mean, one of the things that happened in February, a Chinese guy was walking around Worth Street and he was stabbed. And the guy said, the attacker turned himself in and said, oh, I didn't like the way he looked at me. And my thing is, the NYPD was charging him with a hate crime, but the DA decided not to follow suit. And so I held a press conference that Monday and I said, what the heck? What do we have to do? Do we need another Vincent Chin for this to happen? Like, I mean, Vincent. And so like, my thing is like, what does it, I mean, what does someone have to say? I can have hate in my heart, and I could attack you. And as long as I don't say something derogatory, it won't be charged as a hate crime. So if I'm smart enough, I'm not going to say it. I'm just going to go and like hurt you. And my question is, what is a guy doing with an 8-inch knife in Chinatown? It's hunting season for him.
Yeah.
He's looking for a Chinese or an Asian person to attack. And so my thing is, what do we need? How many more victims do we need for, it's not even like the NYPD anymore. It's the DA's office. What do we need for the DA to wake up and say, like, look, this is happening? I mean, right now, I wrote an op-ed early March. And, I went through a couple of drafts with a friend of, we were going back and forth. And I was quoting the number of hate crimes. And each day that number changed. So from the first draft of my op-ed to the last draft that I submitted to the Daily News, it was maybe a week. The number jumped from like 30 to like 50. 20 incidents in New York City alone in a week. And those are the ones that are reported. So what about the ones that weren't reported? We don't know.
Can I read this statistic to you? I have
yes,
to.
Please.
I want to say this one while because it's something that needs to be said as well too. So between March of 2020 and late February 2021, there were roughly 3,800 anti-Asian racist incidents that was reported across the United States, and 68% of them were from women. And according to the AAPI, which is Asian American Pacific Islander, right? Women reported that it was two times more than men. I can't fathom that within 1 year that much hate crime was occurring. And
right.
where was the media? Where was it?
And that's the thing that I wrote about this in my blog, and it's unfortunate, right? Because it took Daniel Day Kim and Daniel Wu, celebrities, to get the media's attention. And it's kind of like, okay, so what if there's no celebrity status, celebrities backing this, there's no legitimacy to it? Because what happened was there was an incident out in Oakland, and Daniel Day Kim and Daniel Wu offer this award for leading to the arrest of the attacker. And so that kind of caught on, and then Olivia Munn, all these other celebrities came in, and that I think was really what pushed it. But I want to just say, from the New Yorkers that are here, I want to applaud Stefan Kim. He is a reporter here in New York. He's been reporting this. And it just never got mainstream. Like CNN just started covering it after Daniel Day Kim, but Stefan was covering it way before Daniel Day Kim came into the picture. And us New Yorkers knew about it, but now it just kind of exploded. And I'm so thankful, and I'm really appreciative that Daniel Day Kim and Daniel Wu lend their voices so that we could be heard. But the mainstream media wasn't covering it. And then Atlanta happened, they covered it, and like, it's no longer a discussion. And it's not even a month yet. It's a month to this day, but they stopped covering it like 2 weeks ago. Like, I don't even know what's going on. And so it just troubles me that, these things were just covered and then they disappear.
I totally agree with you. One of the biggest things that I can say is that it didn't disappear in my heart. Like, I still think about it, and I still think about my friends, and I still think about anybody. It also frustrates me because I've also seen this with my own eyes. If you see an Asian American walking down, an Asian person walking down the street, you'll see somebody try to move to the side. And I'm like, so to me, to be honest with you, how I look at this virus versus the hate, I feel like the hate is stronger than the virus. So we're ready to
Mhm.
move to the side because we just have this impression that this person is going to give me COVID, or you started COVID. It's so ignorant to me that I can't, I'm so baffled by, the fact that, like what you just said, why are we not educating people? Why that, most recently there was killings of Asian Americans and we talked about it, and then now it's just okay, let's just move on.
Right.
On a day-to-day basis, I have friends that have to literally, and I know I said it, but I got to say it again, they don't want to get into the New York City subway because they're so
No.
afraid. They don't want to go on the
Yeah.
train to go to work because they're so afraid. I i get so frustrated with that because there's so much more things going on in the world that we should be focusing on more than worrying about the way our complexion or the way that our characteristics make up who we are. But for some odd
Right.
reason, we just don't talk about it enough. We ignore it. We act as though because the population is smaller as far as Asian Americans, that it's not as important. But to be honest with you, the conversations need to continuously happen, like what we're doing right now. Even though I know that
Right.
I don't have a media platform, but if I can share this video and impact somebody, even if it's one person, I feel like I'm
Right.
doing something for me
You're
to
right.
make sure that this world is going in that best place. You know,
Right.
and we still are dealing with so much hate. I mean, I can't I can't think I can't think things are going to get better until we educate, until we talk, until we really say it out loud, until we be uncomfortable. I'm sitting here talking
Right.
to Susan, who first and foremost, I'm looking at you as a woman. I grew up in New York City as well too. I have a
Mhm.
master's degree. We share that in common. We both love helping people. We share that in common.
Right.
So why isn't that the conversations that we can continuously have?
That's a really good question. And I think, part of the thing is, um, I honestly think racism sells. I mean, that's what is, selling in the papers. Um, you know, I look at it as, it's interesting because we talk about a lot of times, like, um, one of the things that I don't know if you know, but Asians are sometimes called white adjacent.
I've never heard of that before. What are they
So,
referring to?
so we're almost white adjacent.
I've never heard of that before.
And it's used a lot in when you look at the specialized high school testing, the SHSAT. So there's been a movement to eliminate it as a criteria for entrance into specialized high school. I'm a proponent for it because I came through that system. I went to Brooklyn Tech. I took the test, went to Brooklyn Tech, and I feel like, when I was there at Brooklyn Tech, there were equal amount of Black, Hispanic, white, and Asians. Now, that has since changed because the public school system got rid of district-wide gifted and talented program. It used to be called Special Progress when I was in school. So that was citywide. And so they took, the best of all the districts, and kids ended up at Brooklyn Tech. And so what happened was they got rid of those programs citywide, and they only concentrated at like good schools, and they just let failing schools continue to fail instead of investing in them. And so what ended up happening was the representation of Black and Hispanics went way down. I think there was like 90% Asian and whites in these specialized high school. And so what happened is, and I think, that's people who want to get rid of specialized high school started, because, we no longer, because Asians represent a high percentage, they couldn't use the word minority because we're already in that group of 90%. So
Mhm.
then they started using Black and brown students. Then they were like, well, we can't really use Asian and white 90%, so they started labeling us white adjacent.
Oh my
And
God.
so that was And it's kind of interesting because a lot of people don't know that term unless you're in that educational debate. And it's kind of like, wait, what do you mean white adjacent? You know, and I get asked a lot when I talk about that. It's like, what does that mean? And I was like, it's literally what it means. You know, you're almost white, like adjacent to being white.
So, so I have to ask after that what you just mentioned to me. Tell me, and I want to put this out there. What are some stereotypes that you want people to stop and think twice before they just spit out things that are just not true based off of, their thoughts?
That all Asian Americans are successful. A lot of them live in poverty. A lot of them live in low income housing. You know, I think that those that are successful, really the family gave up a lot to, you know, they pay for the tutoring classes. They're, you know, on a great day like today, it's sunny out, you know, the kids are in tutoring programs, you know, and the family's like, look, we really need you to do well in school because education is a vehicle for you to leave poverty behind. And so I think that's one of the things that I want a lot of people to understand. You know, Letitia, I'm going to tell you this. This is a story that's personal to me. I was out there petitioning, getting signatures to get my name on the ballot. This was in March. I was near Chinatown getting signatures. And I'm approaching someone, say, hey, sir, good morning. How are you? And the first thing he said to me was, what are you selling? And that was like, you know, and it's because a lot of Chinese Americans, they sell trinkets on the streets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, you know, whatever bias you have, no, I'm sorry, I'm not selling anything. I am just, you know, trying to get my name on the ballot. And so, you know, those are the things that I feel like the stereotype that people, you know, think about. I mean,
One of the things, though, that's so important based off of what you just said, there are certain people who deliberately do it. And then I think that there are individuals that have an unconscious bias and they don't recognize that they are doing it. And in those type of cases, I'm just a fan in education. You know, I love the fact that when we started this conversation, you mentioned to me a hate crime that occurred with you, but you still wanted to kind of give someone a second thought before I just automatically think that way. But we need more people who can be like you, who can have a conscious way of looking at things. I think right now, us having this conversation, I'm hoping that somebody can see that your comments that you make to someone can hurt them. And it's stereotyping on a level of feeling trying to make someone feel less than. And on top of it, I'm gonna be honest with you. So, you know, what is wrong if someone decides to want to sell things, whatever choices that they make, but don't just assume that I am that person as well too. So like, you know, I think it's more so much about education than it is anything else. It's, you know, I used to work at a company where, you know, diversity was really, really big. And I remember there was this one incident that I was dealing with, and an employee said something that was inappropriate in regarding to an Asian American. And the comment was, why don't you go back to your country or something like that, right? And, you know, being in HR, having, you know, the background that I had, you know, it's so easy to want to discipline somebody, right?
Right.
More so than it is to sit them down and explain to them and educate them and make them understand and have a different lens. Now, if you continuously do it after that, you understand that you're purposely doing it. But there are so many people out there that are just uneducated. And I think us talking right now is so beautiful. I really do.
Right. And I think, you know, one of the things that, you know, you touched upon is words can be hurtful, right? And once you say it, you can't take it back, which is why I'm so cautious and, you know, mindful and respectful of how I talk about my attack on the subway, because I don't want to add fuel to the flame, right? Like we had an ex-president that was spewing garbage out of his mouth and, talking about it as a China virus. I remember I was on the bus and some kid was talking about bat soup, because they were saying that Chinese people eat bat soup. And
Oh,
that's
back.
how bat, like, yeah, the bat. And how that was how we got coronavirus. And that's how it came to this country. And the thing is, right, if it were Susan Lee, not the candidate, hearing this, I would have gave him, I would have gave him a schooling. And that's the thing that, I, during all this, I have to kind of compartmentalize my emotions, how I act as an individual, private citizen Susan Lee versus Susan Lee, the candidate. And it was one of those things that I wanted to, like, educate him, but in a Susan Lee private citizen way, not the candidate way. And I had to hold myself back, right? Because the last thing I needed was someone to record me and put it on YouTube. But with all this Asian hate crime, I had to literally take a day off from campaigning. And I was honest with my followers. I do a episode called Saturday with Susan, a series. And I was candid and I said, you know what? I need to take a day off for my mental health. I need to process this as Susan Lee, the private citizen, because as a candidate, I need to kind of remove myself from my feelings because I need to be, responsive to all the communities that I need to serve. But I wasn't able to mourn what was happening in my community. And so I had to take that day off. And, that is one of the things that I worry about in the Chinese community is the mental health of those that are constantly on edge, the anxiety. Like I have anxiety going out because I'm like, that person, regardless of what his race is, might attack me if I say, hey, I'm Susan Lee running for city council. I could get punched in the face very easily just because he didn't like the way I look. And so those are the things that I struggle with as a candidate, as a public figure. And so it's one of those things that my mom is, she's just kind of like, you need to be vigilant.
Yeah. So you mentioned to me, because the topic for me is always about inspiring somebody. Hopefully that one person hears us, right? So we talked about
Yes.
some stereotypes that we want to put to bed, but now I also want to talk about inspiring Asian Americans, right? Like, what do you want to tell them? What would you like for an Asian American to know about what's happening right now, or just in general, based off of our conversation?
I want to say, find your voice, use your voice. Words matter. Be cautious of what you say, because once, it leaves your mouth, you can't take it back. However, I think it's really important to use your voice in a positive way to affect change. I was hesitant to talk about my attack. I was hesitant to talk about, the discrimination or the biases I faced on the campaign trail. But then I felt like, as a public figure, as a candidate, I have a platform. And if I don't use it, it's a disservice to those that I'm trying to serve. And so regardless if you're Asian, you're Black, women, men, use your voice, use your platform to affect change. Because I think ultimately, if we speak up, things will change. And I think conversation is really important because I think organically, you and I are learning from each other through this conversation. And I think that if you have an open mind and if you have all these conversations and you voice your opinions in a constructive way, change will happen.
I agree. I have to say this statement though, because Kamala Harris to me is the utmost person that we can kind of think about. She's touching every barrier, right? You got a female, you got a Black American, you got an Asian American, and look at her where she is at. You know what she said, and I have to say this quote. She said that Ultimately, this is about who we are as a nation. And Asians have the right to be recognized as American, not as the other, not as them, but as us. And that's so important to me because I no longer want people to categorize Asian Americans as though they're not people. Like it's a whole separate group of, but they're human beings right along the Americans in this country. So I thought that was just such a beautiful quote that she said, a
Right.
statement that she said. It was just it touches me, and I want to make sure
Right.
that I even share that with my son and my daughter and my family and my friends. I really want to repeat it over and
Right.
over again. And I hope anybody that is watching this, episode, that it connects with them and they start looking at it differently. And not only, I feel like I have the duty and the right to also speak up and say something. So you mentioned to me how you want Asian Americans to speak up. But Americans in general, we all need to speak up. Stop the hate
That's
crimes.
right.
Stop the hate crimes. This world can be
Right.
so much a better place if we can just recognize and understand our differences is what makes us who we are.
Exactly. And that's what America's about, right? Like, I mean, one of the things that I think it's really interesting in this conversation is, you know, the Irish Americans felt discriminated when they first came to this country. And so all of us have some kind of struggle when we came to this country. And I just want us to recognize that, we are who we are because of the melting pot that we are. America is a great country. New York City is a great city, the best city in the world because of different people from different races, socioeconomic backgrounds, educational backgrounds, and cultural backgrounds. And I think that that's what makes us a melting pot.
This was such a beautiful conversation. It really did warm up my heart. I feel that,
Thank
I
you.
made a friend. I hope, Susan, that we can stay in contact with each other.
Yes,
This is
for
something that's so
sure.
important to me. And I really want to, embrace when I love positive people, number one. So it's not about Asians. It's just I just love positivity and learning.
Mm-hmm.
And, I embrace all different cultures. It's just to me, it's amazing to learn about different people. So I'm hoping that somebody can get, something out of this. I think they will, because the conversation was very enlightening, enriched and enlightenment with a lot of taking away the stereotypes and understanding, look, we have a Black African American woman talking with an Asian
Mm-hmm.
woman, and we are completely having an amazing conversations with smiles
Right.
on our faces, and we can
Yeah,
work
and
together.
we're sending that positive energy out there. Like you said, stop the hate. Regardless of what kind of hate, it could be gender bias hate, it could be sexuality bias hate. Like, stop the hate and just love each other as human beings. And I think that that is what we can bring going forward, is this positive energy so that we can spread love.
I think it's more for me to really embrace vulnerability and just being
Mm-hmm.
transparent and honest and just having conversations and allowing, because the thing is, we always connect to high profile people, but the average everyday person, we all have so much going on in our lives, and I'm quite sure this story that we just mentioned, somebody is going to connect with it. And I think that's my
Right.
purpose and that's my goal. That's the reason why I was so excited about doing this one,
Oh,
because I want
thank
people to
you.
see that, it's bigger than what they thought it was. And but then also too, we can make it that we can get along with each other if we just start having these conversations.